Hi kids, this is Miss Colleen, and sometimes you see me teaching, but sometimes you see me singing music with you. I'm really glad to be here today, and I'm excited because I've been watching how Miss Heidi showed you all about tracks, and then she showed you about birds last week, and I thought, today, why don't we look at some of the many kinds of trees that God created. He created them on the third day of creation. Now, let me think about trees. There are two big groups of trees. There are the deciduous trees and the coniferous trees. Those are big words. Deciduous means the leaves fall off in September and October. Coniferous, sometimes we call them evergreens, and that helps us remember that they stay green all year long. They don't lose their leaves. So those are the two kinds. And there are some things we look at when we look at trees. Can you see here? We can look at a tree, and the first thing we can see are either empty branches or branches full of, that's right, leaves. And the other thing we can see is this part right here, and that's called the trunk. And the trunk has something special on it called bark. But we'll talk about that later. So now, I want us to think about trees have different kinds of shapes. Let's see, in my booklet here these are some evergreen trees. Do you notice what kind of shape mostly you see? That's right, it's a triangle. But the deciduous trees, let's see, they're a little different. Let's look at their silhouette. What do you notice? I see that they're mostly kind of rounded, sometimes long and rounded, but mostly rounded. So deciduous trees have a different silhouette than most evergreen trees. And we might notice that when we look at some trees today in my yard. And that brings me to the other thing about trees, and what they have on them is leaves, right? Let me see. There's lots of kinds of leaves. Well, leaves have different arrangements, like how they're put on a branch. They have different shapes. Look at this, has lots of different shapes. They have different edges, and they have different patterns on the leaves. Those are the veins on the leaf. And one thing you notice about leaves is they come in all different sizes. Look at those. A small leaf and a big leaf. And both of those are in my yard. You can see, sorry. Now, when we look at a deciduous tree leaves, those are the ones with all different kinds of shapes and sizes. But there are leaves on an evergreen tree. If you've ever noticed, most of them are usually very skinny, and we call them needles. Although one of the trees I'm going to show you today doesn't have needles like that. But the thing that the evergreen trees do have is pine cones. And have you ever seen different pine cones? Maybe in your yard or maybe in a botanical garden? Well, in my yard I don't have this tree, but the tiniest pine cone is a hemlock pine cone. See how small it is? But pine cones come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. So there's one that's a little bigger, and there's one that's a little longer and skinnier. But I like this is my favorite one. This is a 10.5-inch pine cone, and it came from my husband's grandmother. She went and visited somebody in California, in Northern California, and she found this pine cone a long time ago. And so I have had it for over 40 years. Isn't that cool how God made from the teeniest little pine cone to the biggest one? That's exciting. Now, some of you might live where you've got lots of land and lots of trees grow naturally. Some of you might be in the city and you have some trees in your yard or trees along the side of your street. I happen to live out in the country, and we only live on about 1 acre of land, but we have a lot of different kinds of trees. Some are natural, but a lot of them were planted either by the previous owner or my family. So we're going to start on our first tree today, and this is a silver maple. Let me show you a leaf of a silver maple. It looks a little different than some other maple leaves, but we really like this tree. It's really tall. The reason it's called a silver maple is the bottom of the leaf is a silvery, lighter whitish color, not green. The thing that I thought maybe all of you might enjoy doing at home is to find some trees, and there's something you can do to identify your trees. Let me show you. You'll need some white paper and a crayon. You can pick any color you want. Today, I use lots of different colors. But this is what we're going to do. We're going to put the paper on the tree and then rub. We have to take the paper off the crayon, make sure that's okay with Mom and Dad, and then we're going to rub it. Let's see what happens. Oh, this tree is a little harder to rub. Let's see what happens. It's hard to get the crayon to touch everywhere, but it shows you what the bark of this tree looks like. We can look at the tree, but if you didn't have the tree with you in your pocket, you could take out this paper and say, look at this silver maple tree. It has some really heavy ridges, and it looks like, in person, we can see that there are big cracks and crevices in between parts of the bark. Now, while we're here looking at this bark, I thought we could just say something about what does the bark of the tree do? The leaves help get the sunlight to help the tree grow. The bark protects what's inside the trunk, the different tubes that take water up and disperse things through all of the tree. It also keeps out bugs and disease. The bark is made specially by God to help the tree grow, just like us. So we're going to look at some more trees around my yard. Now I tell you, I have about 18 different kinds of trees, but we're just going to look at a handful today. Let's try that. Wait, this is a balsam fir. Let's go and look at it. This is a balsam fir, and if we notice, this is a set of one of the branches and lots of leaves. Remember we said the evergreen tree has skinny needle leaves instead of the flat ones from the deciduous trees. The balsam fir is nice and soft, actually, even though it looks prickly. And then I didn't think we were going to be able to climb into the trunk very easily for the camera to see us. Miss Amy wouldn't appreciate that. So I already went in and did a rubbing of the balsam fir. If you look carefully, it has like little light dotted lines. It's not as rough as the silver maple tree. Our next tree is a gray birch. Let's go and see what it looks like. Now, the gray birch is another deciduous tree. You can see it has flat, different shaped leaves than we've had before, different than the maple tree at least. And then I already did the rubbing for this tree as well. Let's see what it looks like. Can you see there are some straight lines this way, and there's straight lines going this way as well. You can see it better maybe on the actual trunk of the tree, where it looks like little green lines coming through the whitish gray bark. I like this birch tree. All right. Now our next tree is the one next to the house. It's called a shagbark hickory. See if you can tell where it got its name from. So this is the shagbark hickory. We'll talk about that bark in just a second, but I wanted to first show you the leaf. That's right. Do you see this? This is one leaf. It's different from the other leaves that we looked at because it's called a compound leaf. And each of these individual leaflets help make one leaf on our tree. So the shagbark hickory is different in that respect. Now, if you see this bark, it is very, very rough. There are big pieces that stick out. And so when I made a rubbing of it, it was hard to really see what it looked like. So I wanted Miss Amy to get a really good picture of that for you. Because the actual rubbing just looks like, it looks like there are some big pieces, but it's hard to tell that they actually stick all the way off of the tree. And that shagbark hickory is going to bring us lots and lots of nuts this year. It's already dumped loads of flowers off the tree, and that means it's a big nut year. These two trees that we're going to look at as our last two in my yard there's 4 red pines and 1 northern white cedar. Let's look at them up close. Now this is a red pine, and you'll see it's an evergreen or a coniferous. And actually we can see some of the pine cones as well as the long needle-like leaves. And we know it's a red pine because these kind of needles usually come in clusters of 2, 3, or 5. And this tree has clusters of 2. You can see I peeled off 1 leaf of the red pine tree for you to see. And when I did the rubbing on this tree earlier today, look, you can see lots of long dark lines that go up and down on the tree. And if you looked at the trunk, you would see them there as well. Now our last tree that we're going to look at in my yard is called a northern white cedar. Now my husband said, no, that's an arborvitae. And I looked it up. Well, yeah, they used to call these eastern arborvitaes, but then we brought in other arborvitaes that didn't look like this, and we just went to the new name of the northern white cedar. And this is a little tricky. There's our bark, is back in there, but I wanted you to see the needles. Remember I said not all evergreen needles are needles? Evergreen leaves can be a different way, and this one is one of those. It's flat and scaly, and it has the pine cone right there on the leaf. Isn't that cool? God made them all so different. And that's a good thing. It helps us to identify them and know what kind we have. And you'll notice this is the bark of the northern white cedar. I think we might have confused those earlier, but you can see it has lines and it's kind of papery smooth, even though it has those lines. Right now, you are looking at the silver maple, the first tree that we looked at in my yard. See how tall it is? It could grow up to 125 feet tall, and I think this one is close to that. We just, for a last little glimpse around my yard, wanted to look at some things that aren't trees, but they're called shrubs or bushes. We've got a dappled willow or Japanese willow here, and we have some filbert or hazelnut trees or bushes. They will grow almost as big as a tree though. And a story that Miss Amy thought I could tell you is my sons like to do 4-H, and plant science gives awards for different categories, and often there will be gift certificates for a local nursery. And my sons love to get trees, and one of them found this dappled willow and thought it was really beautiful, and it is especially beautiful when the flowers come out like this. Now remember, before we talked about the parts of the tree you could see, the branches and the trunk. But now we're going to talk about the part that you can't see as well. It's the roots. And there's something really special about the roots of a tree and what it does. Let's just read this one verse from Psalm 1, verse 3. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Just like the tree along this stream that we're looking at today. Now this is the tree that we just looked at from further up the stream. It's called a black willow, and you can see it's spreading its branches and the leaves are green. And I'm just going to read a little thing about Psalm 1 that we just read earlier. When we trust and hope in God, it produces a very strong root system. And that's the root system that anchors us strongly. When we trust in God and not in ourselves, our roots go deep in the ground and we can't be shaken. The roots keep us safe in all the weather that the world throws at us too. Heat can come, the wind can blow, but we are here and we stay and we overcome because we are watered by the Word of God. And that root system causes growth, just like in this big tree. It brings life to the rest of the tree. It lets us bloom and make fruit. If we keep trusting in God, we will have all the strength we need to stand and grow and flourish, just like the trees that God made. And as the sun goes.